What is FAFSA and who has to fill it out?
FAFSA is an acronym. It stands for Free Application for Federal Student Aid. It's basically just an application that has a series of demographic, household, and financial questions. And those questions are used to determine your financial aid eligibility. You can kind of think of it as the passport that allows you to access various federal and state aid programs. Also, some scholarship opportunities will want you to have a FAFSA completed. Anyone who is interested in finding money to go to college will want to complete a FAFSA. So I definitely think that you should.
When do I apply for FAFSA?
So the FAFSA becomes available each year on October 1st. So it's not something that's a one and done. You want to complete the FAFSA each year on or after October 1st. And most schools have what's called a priority processing deadline. So it's important to get that FAFSA in early so that you are receiving all of the financial aid that you are eligible for.
What are the types of aid and other options of paying for school?
Students have the opportunity to apply for, as part of the FAFSA, federal opportunities for financial aid, state opportunities for financial aid, and then most colleges and universities provide them with a merit-based scholarship or need-based financial aid. You, as a part of the FAFSA, also have your federally insured student loans, and then federal work study may be something you are eligible to participate in at a university where you're working at a job at the university and they pay you a stipend, basically. Then there are also private scholarships that you could apply for. We highly recommend that students check out national free, emphasis on free databases. Fastweb.com is one we highly recommend, but those would include civil organizations, foundations, and then if you have a part-time job, your employer may provide you with some sort of education benefit if you work a set number of hours or are in good standing as an employee.
What do I need to fill out FAFSA for the first time?
So the first thing that you're going to do when you are ready to start your FAFSA is you're going to create an FSA account. You're going to need to create a username and password for both you and for a parent, because the FAFSA, as long as you're a dependent student, the FAFSA is going to have to be electronically signed by both a student and a parent. So you'll each need your own ID and password in order to complete the FAFSA and sign it. So you're going to create your ID and password, and then you'll use that ID and password to log into your FAFSA if you need to make changes later, any of that kind of thing. So what information you'll need to have with you, the first item is your social security number, which you can find on your social security card. So you'll need that. And then if you have a driver's license, you should have that handy. If you don't have a driver's license, that's okay too. You can actually just skip that step if you don't have a license. And then you'll need to have available to you your tax information and your parents' tax information. So you're going to be using, for the 21-22 FAFSA, you're going to be using 2019 tax information. So you're going to want to have your 1040 IRS tax forms from 2019, and you're going to need the students and the parents. And if you as a student did not file taxes in 2019, that's okay. You don't need, it will give you the option on the FAFSA to say that you didn't file. So you'll also need any W-2s for you and your parents from 2019. So any place that you or your parents worked and earned income during that year, you should have a W-2 from that place. And you'll need to have those handy so that you can put those numbers and information in. Again, if you didn't have any earnings, you didn't work anywhere as a student during that 2019 year, you won't need the W-2. You can just bypass that. You also need to have any kind of records of any untaxed income that you might have or that your parents might have. which might be child support, interest income, VA benefits, anything like that, other income that you had from 2019. And again, that's for both the student and the parents. And then also you need to know your assets amounts. So this would be like your checking and savings accounts, the amounts that you have in there, and then any other kind of investments that you have or that your parents have, like stocks or real estate, anything like that. You need to know the amounts for those things. And then the last thing is know the schools that you want to list on your FAFSA. So kind of have a list in mind of all the different schools that you're interested in, and you can list them on your FAFSA. You don't have to have already applied to the school or been accepted to the school or anything to list it on your FAFSA. It's just basically providing the FAFSA with the names of the schools that you want to receive your information. So it's important that you put any schools that you're interested in on there.
How is this year's FAFSA different than last year's?
So this year's FAFSA actually had minimal changes compared to last year, which is nice, but there were still a few. So this year, the FAFSA is using your 2019 federal income tax information. So the FAFSA always uses prior year taxes, so you don't have to wait until your taxes are filed. And the 21-22 FAFSA will use 2019's tax information. Another change was actually the annual income threshold for an 0 EFC student. What that means is an expected family contribution number of 0. The threshold actually changed from 26,000 to 27,000. And then another change is that when students and parents use the IRS data retrieval tool, the data retrieval tool will now actually transfer information based on the question if your parent filed a Schedule 1. This was confusing for a lot of our families last year. They didn't know if they filed a Schedule 1. A Schedule 1 houses business income and farm income, and that's important information on the FAFSA. But now that will transfer seamlessly and it'll be masked and it'll fly right onto your FAFSA. So it's important to use that data retrieval tool because it is the most accurate information.
With separated parents, whose information do I need?
Yeah, that's a really good question and one we get asked quite a bit. So essentially what it's asking for is, at least for financial aid purposes, who is defined as a student's custodial parent. And per the Department of Education, a custodial parent is defined as the parent that a student lived primarily with over the past 12 months. In my experience, that usually will give a student a pretty good indication of who they should be reflecting on the FAFSA. But sometimes in instances where students truly spend 50% of their time with both parents, there's kind of a secondary level question that from then it would go on to who provided more financial support for the student over the past 12 months. So what we hear from students sometimes is they get confused, perhaps if one parent is claiming them as a dependent on their taxes 1 year. The FAFSA actually doesn't get into that kind of level of family dynamics. It simply is who did you live with more the past 12 months? And if that's equal, the next level would be who provided more financial support for you over the past 12 months.
What do I do if my parent/parents' income has changed since filing?
Yes, this is a question that the financial aid office gets a lot, especially in these times. But we've always had a method or mechanism to change income if needed. So definitely do the FAFSA form and don't make any corrections on the FAFSA form, but contact your individual school. They're allowed to do professional judgment and look at a separate time period than that was reported on the FAFSA form. So some schools might call that a special circumstance appeal form, an income change form. But if you have questions about doing that, definitely contact your financial aid office. They might have something on their website, and you would do that if you're doing multiple colleges for each college.
How do I handle loans responsibly so I'm not buried in debt after graduation?
So There are some steps that you can take before you're enrolled in college and then while you are in college to reduce your loan burden. The first would be to compare schools and financial aid packages. You want to consider going to an in-state school. In-state tuition is usually less than out-of-state. Once you have accepted a school and you are officially offered your financial aid, only take the amount that you need. You may be offered an amount that exceeds the cost of your tuition and fees. And if you don't need that extra money for living expenses, decline it. Apply for as many scholarships as possible. The more free money you can receive, the less loans that you'll need. And if you find that you get a substantial scholarship, but you've already accepted loans, remember that you can return those loans to the lender. If at all possible, work while you are attending school so that some of your expenses can be covered by income. And some employers even have tuition reimbursement or scholarships just for their employees. And while you're in school, you want to try to pay off your loans. Although you're not required to make any payments on your loans while you're in school, at least half time, paying off the interest on your unsubsidized loans or even paying into the principal amount will reduce your debt burden after graduation.
When will I get my FAFSA results back?
When you file your FAFSA electronically, you'll receive a response in, say, 3 to 5 days from the Central Processing Center. They will email you a link to your student aid report, which is a summary of what you put on the FAFSA. And then they will also forward all of that information to the schools that you have included on your FAFSA. Once the schools receive your FAFSA results, they will interpret the data and put together an award package specifically for you, just based on your FAFSA results. The turnaround time on this part of the process will vary from school to school and can also depend on the date that you were admitted to the school. With all of that in mind, if you're going to file your FAFSA soon, the next few days, few weeks, you can probably expect a 2 to 4 week turnaround time before you hear something from the schools. You can be assured that all of us schools understand the urgency in getting out the award letters because you have to make an informed decision of where you'd like to attend. So we do our best at getting those out as quick as possible.
Who can I contact if I have questions about FAFSA before, during, and after filling it out?
Okay, so there is actually a lot of resources for assistance when filling out the FAFSA. My first recommendation before you fill out the FAFSA would be definitely to attend a financial aid night. There might be one through your high school or one that the school is hosting that you're interested in. It might be called a FAFSA filing workshop, perhaps. And that's going to give you really beneficial information in assisting you to complete the FAFSA. If you're curious about where a local place like that might be in your specific county, there's a really great resource through OASFA, which is the Ohio Association of Student Financial Aid Administrators. You can click on there and select their FAFSA help. And then you can search by county and identify where a virtual workshop may be or a place of assistance in completing the FAFSA. Also, where you complete the FAFSA, which is studentaid.gov, they have wonderful resources for assistance while you're filling out the FAFSA. So they have 3 ways of communication. You can reach out to them through a live chat, you can email them, or you can also call them too. So that's listed on their website. And then I would always recommend reaching out to the school of interest. So if you're having trouble filling out the FAFSA or you have questions after filling it out, when you're going to get your financial aid award, you can go right to that school and contact them and find out more information. Sometimes when you fill out the FAFSA, there are additional requirements that you maybe have to complete. So reaching out to the school would be a great opportunity. And currently, some schools are even offering one-on-one financial aid assistance with completing the FAFSA. So it really just depends on the school that you're interested in. So I would really encourage you to reach out to them as well.
Am I obligated to anything once I fill out the FAFSA?
No, absolutely not. The FAFSA is simply a free tool that the Department of Ed uses to see if you are eligible as a student and family for any federal or state aid. And then also a nice benefit, most students qualify for federal student loans. However, if you apply for a scholarship or outside organization, what have you, you can reduce your loan amount that you'd be taking out by the difference of that scholarship. So always keep that in mind, and definitely always look into outside scholarships before taking loans.
Do I have to wait until I get my FAFSA results to apply to schools or schedule classes?
Okay, so applying to schools, you can apply to colleges at any time before or after you've completed the FAFSA. You don't have to wait till you've applied or vice versa. Once you are accepted to the school that you've applied to, the financial aid office is going to be able to process an offer for you. But if you've not yet completed the FAFSA or you've not added that school to the list on your FAFSA to receive that information, the school is not going to be able to fully process an offer for you. So maybe they would only be able to offer you, merit-based awards and not, maybe a need-based grant or something like that. So basically, it's important in order to get your full offer from the school, you're going to want to be accepted and have your FAFSA in. It doesn't matter which order those two things happen in. But once you've been accepted and your FAFSA is received by the school, that's when the financial aid office is going to actually be able to process a full financial aid offer for you, including institutional aid and any kind of federal or state aid that you would be eligible for. As far as the scheduling classes part, the FAFSA is not usually a factor as far as scheduling classes. It usually doesn't have any effect on that. But like here at Mount Union, we don't actually do any scheduling of classes for new students until they come for their orientation or their preview days. And that doesn't usually happen until over the summer. So scheduling comes, at a later time. You usually would want to have your FAFSA and everything in, way before then, but it shouldn't have an effect either way as far as whether you can schedule or not.
How do I get the most aid when filling out the FAFSA?
Well, there's a few things. The first thing is accuracy. If you have errors when you're completing the FAFSA, such as not using the data retrieval tool, using the wrong line when you're filling it out, that can delay your processing of the FAFSA form and then make corrections. And then if there's certain programs that are limited in funding, you could miss that deadline. So the first thing is making sure that you take your time and try to be as accurate as possible when completing the FAFSA form. And the second thing, as I mentioned, is the deadline. Different schools have different priority deadlines. And so by knowing that priority deadline and applying for the FAFSA and submitting it by that deadline makes you have the highest consideration. So those are the two things that I think that is most important to help you to getting the most aid, and also making sure that you're listing each school that you are interested in on that FAFSA form. I know there's a limited number of spots. You can always submit it looking at the schools that have the earliest priority deadline. And then once it's processed, making a correction and adding additional schools. So making sure that you put every school that you're interested in and that maybe you've applied to or considering applying admission to, doing it on time and being accurate.
What happens if I make a mistake on the application?
Yeah, it certainly happens. No one's perfect. So if you make a mistake, the good thing about the FAFSA is that it's not one and done. So you would go back into the same way that you would originally log into your FAFSA, and there will be like a blue hyperlink that says make corrections. As Teresa mentioned earlier, though, there is a normal processing time for your FAFSA, which is about 3 to 5 days or so. So the only caveat to making a correction to your FAFSA is that you can't make a correction while it's processing. So say I submitted it today, I couldn't go back in 4 hours later if I realized I made a mistake. You do have to wait for that processing time, but then once that takes place, you can go in and make your corrections as you need to.
What will the FAFSA tell me once everything is completed?
Once your FAFSA is completed, instantaneously, a confirmation will pop up on your screen. So this will tell you different key things. It'll tell you congratulations if your FAFSA has been submitted. It's also going to let you know your federal aid eligibility. And keep in mind, this is only a small portion of your possible aid options. So it's going to tell you if you have federal Pell Grant eligibility, federal loan eligibility, but this is also sent to your school and they will give you complete information. It's also going to give you the expected family contribution. This number is just a numerator that schools use to determine other aid eligibility. You'll also get a confirmation email to the email of the student listed. So be sure you hold on to that, because sometimes if a school does not receive that information, they might ask you for key information in that confirmation to help locate that FAFSA form if that school didn't receive it.
What are some helpful practices for filling out FAFSA each year?
Some helpful tips when filing FAFSA each year, when you renew. Some of these items our colleagues have discussed already, but I think they're important to review again. Renew your FAFSA every year and be sure that you know your school's priority deadline. They have those priority deadlines to give out some of the items that a school may run out of, have limited funds. So they set priority deadlines so that everybody can file by a certain deadline and be ensured that they're going to receive the funds that they are entitled to. The nice thing, you can start your FAFSA in October, and the income information is based on prior year taxes. So those will already be filed, and you'll have those at the ready to help you when you do file your tax information on the FAFSA. Speaking of tax information on the FAFSA, it is always encouraged to use the IRS data retrieval tool. So that way, everything that does transfer from the IRS will be correct. And then keep your taxes with you. So because there's a few items that you will have to enter manually, such as wages, things like that. So use the data retrieval tool, but also have your tax information ready with you so that you can enter those manual items. One last thing that I think is a very helpful tip is for parents and students to do the FAFSA together. This helps the student understand what is going on with their student account. They will feel empowered knowing the information that goes into the FAFSA and how it relates to their student account, their out-of-pocket costs, possible loans that are needed, and just giving them that empowerment to understand their student account so that when they get out in 4 years, they'll know what's going on and what was covered by grants and scholarships and what was covered by loans. It's very helpful for a student to know that.